months, Canada has suffered a string of verbal insults from U.S. President Donald Trump, among other things, him saying we should be the 51st state of the United States and referring to our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, repeatedly as Governor Trudeau. That has not sat well with most Canadians, who some have taken to booing the U.S. national anthem at sporting events and pulling back on travel to the U.S. It also doesn't sit well with some American conservatives, and one of those joins me now. Doug Bandow is a senior fellow with the Cato Institute. He joins us from Malta. Doug, thanks a lot for joining us. What is your take? I mean, many people view Donald Trump as a negotiator, and they view these type of insults as certainly unconventional, given the diplomatic history and the close friendship, including a military alliance between Canada and the U.S. over many decades. But they say that what he wants to do is knock the other party in negotiations off balance, to get their heads spinning as a precursor to negotiations. What is your view on the things that Trump has said and why he's said them about Canada?
Well, generally, insulting your negotiating partners is not a way to have success. Now, you certainly can use negotiating tactics and try to put your negotiating partner, kind of surprise them and put pressure on them. But especially if you're negotiating with another country and another people, insulting them is a very bad way of proceeding. And Americans of all people should understand that, because my countrymen and women don't like to have people criticizing America. So they should understand that if the president is criticizing other people and their governments, they're probably going to react the same way Americans do under those circumstances. I think this is absolutely counterproductive. I mean, I think the whole idea of kind of annexing Canada is a ludicrous one. Canadians have shown they want to have their own country. I don't blame them. But this is not the way to proceed if the president is serious.
His aggressive tactics have already led to some quote-unquote results in Canada. We've named a fentanyl czar. The government has appointed a senior law enforcement person, a person with a long history in law enforcement, as a fentanyl czar. They've announced $1 billion Canadian, I believe, in investments on further bolstering the border. What are your thoughts on the results he seems to have achieved early on in the process? Could they have been achieved without the insulting tone of the remarks?
Oh, absolutely. Those results come from the fact the U.S. has a lot of leverage when it comes to Canada. The U.S. market is huge. The U.S. matters a lot to Canadians. I think a very civil phone call to Prime Minister Trudeau indicating major concerns about some of these issues, noting the unfortunate possibility of having to apply tariffs if there's no appropriate resolution, would almost certainly have achieved all of these results without insulting Canadians. And to my mind, what Americans really want to do is have a good relationship with their northern neighbors. And over the long term, the U.S. will get more cooperation if there's a friendly relationship and people are cooperating, than if we're going to people who feel insulted and denigrated by the president.
To the extent that this conversation registers with the average American, how do you think the average American might feel about this? In Canada, as I've alluded to earlier, one thing we say is, look, we fought with the U.S. in World War II. We fought with the U.S. in Afghanistan after 9/11. We've been there at other times for the United States. This is more than insulting. It's outrageous that we get spoken about in these terms, and it's outrageous that our steel and aluminum sectors get targeted with tariffs on invented security grounds. But does any of this register with the American population?
I think most Americans don't pay a lot of attention to the details. If you explain it to them, I think they'd be very sympathetic. Canadians have fought bravely and well. I mean, going World War I. I mean, Canada has an extraordinary record of standing with the United States, the British Empire, Europe. This is something Americans should be recognize. My countrymen live in the most powerful country on earth. They tend to be rather insular. But I think if you sat down with them and explained, look, would you like it if Canadians were saying this about you and your president? Americans would understand. The problem is they're not paying much attention. They see Donald Trump and then they go back to their normal lives.
What approach should the next Canadian Prime Minister, as you know, Justin Trudeau is on the way out and will be replaced either by a new Liberal Prime Minister or potentially a Conservative Prime Minister. What approach should the new leadership of this country take with negotiating trade with the United States, with the Trump administration?
Well, I would suggest basically going to the president and saying, look, we're quite willing to work with you. We understand your concerns, but let's put the personal stuff aside. You know, we've stood with you. We are prepared to stand with you in the future. Let's work together. And frankly, don't insult our people. You know, they've fought well. They've created a democratic country that's quite successful. They like their country. Other people do. So let's talk about results, and let's get past the insults. And that actually might work with him. He's not a stupid man, and he wants results.
You think that might work with him? And he's the one who deals in insults, unlike any other politician in recent memory. You think he can be talked down on this?
I honestly think that if he believes that he'll get results otherwise, that in fact he wants the most effective means. That if Canadian Prime Minister comes to him and say, look, this is counterproductive. You've got my citizens booing your people's national anthem. That's not very good. Let's step back. Let's work through this, and we will address your concerns. I think actually he might be reasoned with. That certainly is my hope.
On another subject, what's your view of the way Donald Trump is approaching the war in Ukraine by becoming very close with Vladimir Putin, largely adopting Putin's view of the Ukraine situation, and in other words, blaming Ukraine for the invasion?
Well, I think that in many ways, Trump has this right in the necessity of ending the war. He's quite correct that 80 years after World War II, it makes no sense for Americans to be paying for Europe's defense. Look, the U.S. is effectively bankrupt. We have a $2 trillion deficit every year. We're spending $1 trillion on interest. The U.S. can't afford this. But again, going about it the way he does is wrong. I think the U.S. has no reason to bring into NATO Ukraine. I don't think that makes sense. On the other hand, Russia's to blame for the war. I mean, Russia did start the war. Now, the U.S., European officials have their own share of blame in terms of expanding NATO and stuff, but no one should have any illusions here. Russia's committed aggression. It's grotesque. The question is, how can we end this, preserve an independent Ukraine, but stop the war? It's a worthy endeavor, but the president shouldn't lose sight of who are the friends and who are the enemies here.
Doug, thank you for a good conversation. Doug Bandow is a senior fellow at the